Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Blue Bubble Podcast. I am Ben Weisland. Joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
So I want everyone listening at home to understand how much of an angel Ben is. Hey, do you want to do the podcast on Sunday night? Dude, actually, I'm totally trying to, but I have to travel all day to Philly. No worries. Can you make tomorrow at 6:15 work? Yes, I can. I get to 6:15 today. Hey, can we do 6:30? Ben's like, yes, of course. I realize the room I'm in has a bad echo. I then run all over around my parents' house trying to find a good spot. It's now 7 o'clock on Monday, and Ben has now wasted, I think, 45 minutes that he was not expecting to waste, which, what an angel. So thank you, Ben, for your unbelievable patience today.
Honestly, it's not my patience. It's like my wife's patience because she's the real angel. It's whatever. I don't mind, but she's patient and allows me to do this. So shout out to her. But yeah, happy to do it. Excited to talk some cross country, some track with you this evening. We have some transfer news, some exciting positive news as a whole of the cross country community. And then we have some ranking stuff to talk about. So we got a lot to dive into. First, the ratings and reviews, still struggling. We got a new one on Spotify, nothing on Apple. So we need to pick that up a little bit.
It is the giving season. All we are asked is for a review. That's it. And that's all we're asking for. So
do while you're at it. Like that wouldn't hurt.
Oh yeah, I mean that wouldn't hurt either. I mean I'd be happy with that too. But I'm not trying to ask for too much at this point, right? I don't want to be the little kid who's like, and I want a race car and I want a pony, and like I can't get too over the top. So yes, 5-star ratings and reviews, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you could do that, that would be great. Ben, where do you want to start today? Because there's a few different pieces of news that we need to start with.
Right, but before we do that, do we need to shout out Hoka? Do we need to cover our bases there?
We do need to cover our bases, right? Because you want to talk about people who have been generous to us. Shout out to Hoka for sponsoring us and getting us through the entirety of December. See, I'm just so new to having an intro sponsor. I think that's why I'm still new to this. So,
but hey, we'll get used to it. We'll get used to it. We can throw in more there if any companies are listening. We're happy to add a few more of these.
I'm not worried about them right now. I'm worried about Hoka. Appreciating Hoka the holiday season. So shout out to Hoka. Thank you, Hoka.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the news that D3 star Alex Phillip is headed to UNC to finish up his eligibility. What I mean, obviously North Carolina has been a team on the rise. I think this is a really good move for him in terms of fit. And I think for North Carolina, with their younger lineup, they can bring in someone that hopefully will give them a little bit of a punch in the mid to back end scoring range for them. I mean, what were your immediate thoughts about this?
Yeah, my initial thoughts and reactions were, oh, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect Phillip to go to UNC. That wasn't one of my first choices for him. But at the end of the day, like UNC got exactly the guy that they needed. I think this is still a somewhat young lineup, a still somewhat developing lineup. They're getting a little bit older, but they still need that veteran presence, a guy who's going to be really solid over the true long distances, can still get a little bit better, who seems like a really nice, like 2 or 3 man for this team. I think he's perfect for UNC and what they need. I would ask you this, though, Ben, with Phillip now on this team and so many guys returning, they lose Tatter, they lose Fleming, but for the most part, they pick the main guys. What's their ceiling? That's all.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I still don't think they're a podium team, but I think they're in that group of like 3 or 4 teams that can realistically go if everything breaks our way and we have a great season and one of those favorites drops off a little bit, we could snag a 4th or 5th place. I think they could be Wake Forest basically next year is kind of what I see for them at this point.
I fully agree. I think Wake Forest is exactly the model that they should be attacking. I think their ceiling is a fourth place podium team, but that's their ceiling.
Hmm.
I think more realistically, they are a sixth or seventh place team at next year's national meet. I think they've got a star in Parker Wolf. If Patrick Anderson can be more consistent, they have a great number two. If Phillip, depending on where he sits in that lineup, he's one of the best like third middle lineups, like support scorers in the country. And they've got a ton of guys who have yet to really be tapped. So I think it's a great fit for UNC. I don't know how I feel about this for Phillip yet. I think it's a good thing, but it's still such a unique mix. I just never anticipate UNC going out to the D3 level and getting a D3 superstar.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who's run 28:48 in the 10K. I mean, he's going like, yeah, obviously he's had so much success on the grass. Just won another national championship in cross country. Like it'll be fascinating to see how he translates. I mean, what do you think a ceiling is for him individually? Like, is he have a potential to be an All American, or is that what where are you at with him right now?
Yeah, I think he has the potential to be an All-American. I'd say, like, just off the top of my head, if you had to ask me, like, where I would place him on feel, I'd say he's like TSR number 50 going into next preseason. I think that's like a fair spot for him. He's a juggernaut in the longer distances. He's great on the grass. He's been getting better with each passing year. And like you said, the 28-40 something 10K, excuse me. I mean, that's a huge mark. And it's a really nice mark and a mark that he could still improve upon before he gets to
Absolutely.
UNC next year. So I could see him slotting in at like TSR number 50. And I think that would be a fair assessment.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I think a very strong pickup for North Carolina. I think it'll be good for him. He'll be able to run with guys that are better than him, which I'm sure was kind of one of the things he wanted to get when he was changing schools. And he'll get Parker Wolf to train alongside Patrick Anderson, and hopefully he can be that last piece in the puzzle as North Carolina tries to take that next step forward from their 10th place finish this year.
Well, speaking of unique and exciting cross country news, let's talk about Akron. Akron men's cross country. It was announced earlier last week, I should say, that the men's cross country team will be returning after originally being cut from the COVID related financial cuts all around the country. Akron was one of many schools like Clemson, William and Mary, Brown University to cut their men's cross country and or track programs. In this case for Akron, it was just their cross country program. But within a year, it was Clemson, it was William and Mary, it was Brown, who all brought their programs back, but Akron did not until now. Thoughts, initial reactions? Do you have any like still lingering questions? What does this mean in your mind?
It's just these decisions never made any sense to me. Why you would cut cross country of all sports? It's like it's such a easily funded sport. There isn't a lot of like financials that go into it, and it just didn't ever make any sense. And you saw those other three schools like that you just mentioned do quick U-turns because they quickly realized that there was a lot more to lose than there was to gain from doing this in terms of the PR and everything. And it was weird that Akron didn't make a similar U-turn right away. But at least they did eventually. They did now. I think this is great for Akron. I think it's great for the sport as a whole, and I hope that these stories prevent this from happening anywhere else. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can take from Akron, kind of doing a mea culpa. It is this will hopefully prevent it from happening.
Like my thing with this is like I think there's good like there were reasons why this didn't make sense. It was Clayton Murphy saying you're not allowed to use my image. Like an
Right.
Olympic medalist who's really your main guy athletically speaking. And he's like, no, you're not going to use my name, image, likeness, all that jazz for promote. Like that's a huge deal. It's oh, by the way, it's just cutting cross country. You're not cutting track. So like you're still keeping, I imagine, some of the same coaching staff. A lot of the kids are really going to be just racing. I imagine it's just expense for travel is really the main difference there. It again, it never made any sense. It's not like, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but there was not a lot of scholarships at all within that program. There was already almost none, maybe one or two. So it's shocking how they go through that and they say, well, $4.4 million it was projected to save between, I think, was it women's golf and men's tennis or some kind of golf tennis combo along with men's cross country. But like I just said, all the expenses really don't go away because you have a track program if you're Akron. So it surprised me. I agree with you. It didn't make a lot of sense. It was bad PR. It made, maybe they had to do it for Title IX reasons that I'm not aware of. Very possible. It just didn't make a lot of sense. I'm thrilled that they're back. Very happy because that's a program that every now and then, like, oh, they've got a guy. They've got some dudes. Not all the time, but every now and then.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you're cutting away at that potential, no matter who you are, by cutting a team, and like, you're not going to get distance guys to come to your program if if you don't have a cross country team. And I mean, we've seen this. Guys from Clemson, from William Mary Brown. We've seen these programs that maybe aren't elite in terms of, like, we're talking about them week in, week out, but they always produce really high quality men and women every few years. And by cutting a program, you're just erasing any opportunity of that happening. So it's great that Akron will be back. It'll be fascinating to see how they build this program up basically from scratch again. But yeah, it's exciting news, and like I said, I think the biggest takeaway is, let's just make sure that this doesn't have to happen anywhere else again.
Well, hopefully that means not another pandemic, which would be great.
Right.
So I would very much appreciate that. I would imagine, let's hope that we don't have another one so we don't have to go through this entire exercise again. But what we do have is competition is back, and we do have rankings. We have indoor track rankings. As you're listening to this, I believe D1 will have already been posted. D2, D3 coming later in the week. Ben and I are going to talk about some of the most challenging names to rank. We won't give away any specifics about where they're located. You got to go to the site for that. But we have a few names. Some of them are listed. Some of them are not. Well, actually, I don't know. It depends on his list. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens here. But Ben, let's start with the men. Who was one of your more challenging names to rank?
So I'm going to start with someone that we haven't talked a whole lot about as of recently, because he kind of faded in the cross country season a little bit. But I had a hard time, and I think you did too, with where do we place the NCAA record holder in the 1500, Eliud Kipsang. Where does he land in our rankings? Because you kind of look at the returners from the mile field and the 1500 meter fields from last year, and there isn't a whole lot of talent coming back. Obviously, we still expect the mile qualification mark to take another step forward. We expect a lot of guys to run fast this year, but a lot of the favorites that have been there over the last few years are gone. Mario Garcia Romo in particular, someone who has moved on. And so I don't want to say it's a weak field, but it's a little bit more of an inexperienced field. Joe Waskom comes back after winning the 1500 meter title last year. But there isn't a whole lot of top end talent there, except for Kipsang. But with Kipsang, we haven't seen him run well at NCAA championships in the track. And so where do you put someone who is probably clearly the most talented runner in his event, but hasn't been able to translate that yet? It was a really hard decision for me.
I still don't know if we got it right. Like, this guy, he was so talented. He's probably, with the potential argument for Nico Young, I'd say probably the most talented distance runner in the NCAA right now. I think just in terms of pure raw talent, Kipsang's either the best or he's number two. I don't know. I just don't know. Like, at some point or another, the national meet, the struggles in the postseason, like, they have to play a factor. Like, they just do. It plays a factor for everyone else. It has to play a factor for him. But, like, at the same time, like, the guy ran 3:33 for 1,500 meters. He's run, what, 1:46 for the 800 meters? Like, I don't know if there's anything more that he really has to do other than maybe A, run a little bit of a faster 3K, or B, actually just run well in the postseason. And it's such a shame because I don't think we have a good answer to that.
Yeah, I feel like the first time we're gonna know where he's at is SEC championships. So, like, if he can win there, I think that'd be a good sign, and a little bit of a championship setting. It's still not going to tell us necessarily what he does at NCAA's, but I would like him to just win at SECs and look good doing it, and then I feel like I'll be a lot more confident. But there really isn't, like you're saying, anything he can do in the regular season that I think is really going to change our opinion of him at this point.
No, and it's such a shame because it's not that long ago that he was what, third or fourth in the 1500 meters outdoors at the outdoor national meet. So like he can do it. It's not like he can't. But I agree. I think the SEC indoor championships will be a great gauge. He'll face likely Anas SAE from South Carolina there. I mean, I think that will be like the much like this past spring against Barrio Garcia Romo. How do you pair up against another legitimate title contender? We'll see what happens. Um, he's probably the most talented guy in the NCAA. It's will he peak when it matters the most? We'll find out. And if he had finished his cross country season as well as he did in previous years, I would be a little more confident. But the end of his cross country season was a little rocky. We'll have to find out what happens.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think he's certainly a top 3 talent, and if he performs like he has in the regular seasons past, I think that's probably where he'll end up at the end of the season. But we will see. All right, who did you have as one of the most confusing names to rank on the men?
This was another 1500/mile guy. In this case, it was Joe Waskom. Um, I I feel so bad being critical. I don't even know if critical is the right word of a 1500-meter national champion. But the problem is that Waskom is one of those rare guys whose raw times and actual performances simply don't match the caliber that he was racing at last spring, or at least in the postseason. This is a guy who went from in the mile last winter from 404 to 356, but that 356 was not going to get him into the national meet, which is a crazy sentence. And he didn't really do a whole lot elsewhere outside of that mile. He did run the DMR at nationals. I think they got All-American honors. But then in the spring, his only complete 1500-meter race going into the postseason is a 345 mark at the South running meet, which wasn't great. And then his best mark going into the Pac-12 championships in the steeplechase was 847. It wasn't a great season. He runs 841 in the steeplechase at Pac-12s. He wins the Pac-12 title in 340, 341, something along those lines, in a thrilling 200-meter kick. Goes to nationals, 339 in the prelims, stuns the country, big kick, wins the title. But the guy really doesn't have much of a resume. There's nothing like time-wise to suggest that he's anywhere near as good as some of these guys. So how do you rank that? Like, we can't just ignore the fact that he won a national title and executed on multiple occasions in championship stages brilliantly. But a 339 in your top 25 rank, like anyone, well, not everyone, but like 50, 60 some guys were running 339 last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part is he isn't guaranteed to qualify. Like, he has to run like better than he has before to make sure that he gets a time to qualify. And I think that's kind of the wild statement to make about a reigning 1500-meter champion. But we've seen it takes an extraordinarily fast time in the mile to qualify. But once, if he does make it, you feel as good about him as almost anybody in the country. It's like the inverse of Kipsang in a lot of ways. Kipsang, you have no worries about his ability to run fast. It's just once you get to NCAA's, you have some questions. Waskom, it's the exact opposite. And so I think he's a great guy to come after Kipsang in our discussion because you have almost the exact opposite worries. I think we both feel like he'll take a step forward and probably run 355 or a little faster to make nationals. And if he does, I don't think it would surprise either of us to see him finish top 3 in the mile this year.
No, like tactically, he's brilliant. Like there's few guys who are like, my final move is legitimately going to come over the final 200 meters of a race of a championship setting, and it's going to work. Like, it's so hard to make that definitive move then when everyone's making their final move over the last 100 meters, last 75 meters, truly gearing up for the final stretch. For him to kind of take the field by storm, get separation, and then just run away from the field, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's not easy to do. You, as a 1,500-meter specialist, probably can appreciate that. Um,
Absolutely.
so I love what he does tactically, or at least what he did last spring. It's just, can you run 355? Can you run 354? And if you can, this is a no-brainer conversation.
Hmm. Absolutely. All right. Do we want to move on to another name?
Let's move on.
We can make this one short because I think we've talked about him a lot, but this list would not be complete without talking about Fouad Messaoudi. Like,
Mhm.
this was another impossible one. He is as on fire as almost anybody in the country, coming off 12th place at cross country, running 7:44 for the win at BU in the 3K. Like, no one has run better. Hardly anybody has run better than him over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Where does that put him in terms of his national rank? How much does his lack of overall experience at the NCAA stage hurt him? Does he have the tactical wherewithal to win or place highly at a national meet? Those are questions we just can't have answered right now. So it feels like throwing darts at a dartboard right now, because it feels like any of those questions could be yes or no, and I don't think I would critique you too much if you picked one of those.
Such a hard name. I really came into these rankings being like, should he even be ranked at all? Should he be ranked top 10? I legitimately felt that way. I had no idea. 12th at the cross country national meets huge. Kind of felt a little sort of, and people are going to give me shit for this, but it kind of felt a little fluky. It felt a little fluky. He validated that with the 744 mark over 3,000 meters at Boston U, gets the win over Hamlin, gets the win over Engels. But it it's just one of those instances where you look at him, you're like, well, what else do you have? Like 744, that barely gets you into the national meet
Hmm.
last year. It gets you in, like by a few spots, but not by a lot. If Fouad wasn't as dynamic in prior seasons as he has already proven to be, this becomes a lot more challenging, and B, we don't rank him where we do. I think we rank him a few spots back. Um, I was more cautious on him. You guys were a bit more aggressive. You and Gavin.
Yeah, I think I mean, he's run what, 339 in the 15. I mean, he came in to last spring as more of a 1500 guy, and I think that dynamism is probably why we felt a little bit more confident in his overall ability, because if he can, he's clearly gone up a level with his aerobic fitness between the cross country and the 3K performance, and if he can continue that, having that speed that he's shown in years past, then I think he's going to be an incredible miler, an incredible 3K runner. And again, I think the question is just, can he pair that fitness with executing at a high level in a extremely difficult circumstance, which is the NCAA indoor championships, where you can be the fittest man in the field and come in 10th because you can make wrong moves, you can get boxed out, things can happen where you can fall back even if you are better than a lot of guys in this field. And that's just something we're going to have to watch and learn to see how he navigates. His first step at BU looks great. It'll be just, but that was a little bit more of a time trial atmosphere. How does he work out in these championship races? I think that'll dictate how high this ranking goes for him.
Is it fair to say this? If he doesn't race at BU, or if he does race at BU, he's like a non-factor. Does he get ranked?
I think we're probably talking about him as a just missed or right on the bubble. I think that BU performance was huge because you think about it, that doubles the amount of like top caliber performances he's had, because
Right.
really the only one he had before that was cross country. And to add that BU performance was so validating. I think a lot of people probably shared your same concerns that cross country performance was a bit of a fluke on the home course. Like it was just kind of out of nowhere. There wasn't a whole lot of lead up, and so maybe just had the day of his life. But that 3K just showed that he's just gone up a level, and I think that is why we felt so confident putting him as high as we did.
Yeah, I still don't know if we were. I think we were maybe a little generous. We'll see what happens. I mean, people by now, if you're a subscriber to the site, you know. If you're not a subscriber, go check it out. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna leave Fouad alone. I agree. He was one of my names. Um, the another name I wanted to get to was Jason Gomez. How the heck do you rank him? He was not just bad last winter. He was awful. He had one good race. It was like a 148 mark. I think he had like a great 1K to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
But then he ran like 152, 151. There was like some combination of like 151, 152. There's like a 156 in there. There was like a 154, 155, something along those lines.
Yep.
Like he was really not great. And then the spring, he wins the Beach Invitational, wins the Sun Angel Classic, runs 147 in the regular season, runs 341 for 1500 meters in the regular season, goes to the national meet, runs 146 in the finals of the 800 meters at the national meet, gets fourth place overall. I have no idea how you rank him. I don't know if we got him right. I don't know if he should have been 10 spots higher, 5 spots higher, if we got him right.
The 800 in general, I think, was a crapshoot for us to pick because there's some guys up top that we really like, and then there's a second tier that I felt like we could have jumbled together and spit them out in almost any like different spots, and it would have felt okay. And I think Gomez fit that bill. Like you said, indoor season wasn't great, and then he just really took a stride forward and kept getting better and better throughout the outdoor season. I mean, it's not like he hasn't run well indoors before. He ran really well 2 years ago when he first got to Iowa State. Looks like one of the top contenders, finished fifth at NCAA's 2 years, so he can do it. And I think that's why he was someone that we felt like had to at least be ranked, and we could maybe argue about where, but his proven ability at NCAA championships to finish well, and as long as he's healthy, I feel like you feel very confident about him making it through the rounds and getting to the final at least.
Yeah. I I don't know if I'm as confident. I think we still need to see a little bit more. Um I could be wrong, but like he is like, don't get me wrong, he's legit. He can do it. Like he's one of the best names out there. If something bad happens to Novoski Anderson or Jonathan Jones doesn't run, the 800 this year, I could see Gomez basically being the
The de
title contender.
facto favorite, yeah.
Like I guess like by process of elimination almost. And I don't even think he's like the third highest ranked 800 guy we have. I think
He is
it's
not.
like, yeah, I was going to say there's a few guys, but there may be a couple ahead of him. But it also wouldn't be crazy if you told me, hey, Jones is going to run the 400, Novoski Anderson, I have no, it goes
Falls
pro
off the face of the
early.
map.
Let's go positive. Let's say he goes pro. I don't know. I'm just making crap up here. And then we'll say, well, by default, it's Gomez. I could see that happening, but I also like I would then walk into that national meet saying, I have no idea who I'm picking.
Right. Yeah. I think he'll be one to watch, and I think as he and a few of those other 800 guys go, will dictate how we feel about the 800 meters, and maybe whether or not Jonathan Jones decides to run the 800. If guys like Gomez are running well, maybe he decides to go to the 400 and opens things up a little bit. All right, I'm gonna go to my last name, and my last name was Brian Fay, who I
Mm-hmm.
was unbelievably lower on than
I
you
saw
and
that.
Gavin. I was like, if you guys want to put him that high, I'm fine with it. You're not going to get any arguments out of me. But like, I was a little nervous about ranking him too highly because I think he has the ability, but we haven't seen him finish real highly at an NCAA track championship. But he's put together great season after great season. And it would make sense that this year would be kind of the year that he breaks out and gets a top 3, top 5 finish in the 3K or the 5K. Or, I mean, heck, he could maybe even go down to the mile.
Yeah, I saw you guys trying, like, I was aggregating the rankings trying to, and, get our final list. And when I ran by yours, I'm like, of all the people, it's like you're his biggest fan, and yet I'm still the one, and Gavin's still the one. Like, Gavin had him really high.
Yeah, that one was like I was like, Gavin, do we switch brains momentarily?
Yeah.
This is a very weird feeling.
Gavin, here's the thing. There's like some writers of ours at TSR who have some like really edgy picks and like predictions and rankings. Gavin is one of those guys, but Gavin's also one of those guys who's able to best back up some of that logic. I still don't always agree with him, but he is able to back it up in a really logical way. And when you think about what Faye brings to the table, it's high level dynamic value. Like, he can be a top 3 guy on a good day in everything from the mile, 3K, 5K. And I don't know how many guys you can say that. I don't know if I would, maybe this year for the mile, I'd say that about Nico Young. But like, I don't know how many guys I'm saying that about. I just don't. And I think for that reason, I could understand why someone was so high on Faye. I don't think he was one of the harder guys though. Like, I think like at the end of the day, everyone came within like a 3 spot. Well, you and Gavin were a few spots away, but we all came within a reasonable consensus of like where he ended up seems incredibly fair.
Yeah, I think where he ended up with is a good spot. I guess I just don't know what to think about him on the track. Like, I think I went into last outdoor season thinking he had a legit shot at being like a top 3 guy in the 5K, and he finished 7th, which I mean isn't horrible. And I think last indoor season, he was 6th in the 5K. Like, he's knocking on the door of a top 3 finish, and I just feel like it's hard to rank someone as high as like Gavin was putting him out there without having done that yet. But I mean, I believe that he could probably, if he tries to run the 3K and 5K, could be one of those guys who scores like 10 points between those 2 events because he's just right in the mix in both races.
Yeah, I have no arguments. I agree. Let me ask you this. Could you realistically see Brian Fay winning a national title this year?
Yes.
So could I. So could I.
I think if he run he's basically Kai Robinson light, who we ranked very highly in our rankings. He has a good kick. As long as he's around with 200 meters to go, you like his chances in a 3K or 5K or 10K, whatever the race is. But he just has to be around. And he hasn't really shown the ability to do that at NCAAs, be there on the last lap, the last 200, to be able to use that finishing kick to win a race.
Yeah, I think he has better range than Robinson.
Yes.
When looking at the mile basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Anyways, my last name on the men's side, I'm gonna say Dayton Carlson of Arizona. Freshman last year, kind of comes out of nowhere, runs 146, and it's like, well, where do we rank him? Is he just missed? Like, there's a lot of guys who have run 146, but not all of them ran as well as he did. But we already got a lot of 800 guys in there. So, like, where does he fit among them? I don't know if there's a good answer for him. I think you can make an argument for him being just missed. I think you can make an argument for him being TSR number 16. I think people will maybe argue with us for where he ended up. But I don't think anyone has a good answer for where he should go.
No one improved more throughout the season last spring than Carlson. I mean, he opened his outdoor track season with a 150.9 and then a 153.5.
Yeah.
Like, and ended up running 146 like that, and finishing 6th at NCAAs. Like, that is a wild improvement. And I think just the lack of experience made him really hard to rank. how he runs on an indoor 800, which is completely different than an outdoor 800, is just a variable we don't know. And I think that's ultimately why I think we had him a little bit lower, because we just haven't seen it from him on the indoor oval yet.
That's the thing. He hasn't raced on the indoor oval. So what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? How do you talk about a guy who's never raced on a 200-meter track? Or at least at the collegiate level, I should say. It's just like, I have no idea what to think of him. I think he's awesome. Like, if you told me, hey, 3 years from now he's going to win a national title, I'd say, yeah, totally. I'd believe that. But right now, I just don't know. And I don't know how you properly rank someone who you really have one rookie season on.
Right.
That was so, like, out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm maybe trying to wonder if we made the right decision now, but
yeah,
we'll
I almost wonder if he had come in as like Cade Flat and did what he did last year. Do we rank him?
Great point.
Or like I think, or do we rank him higher? Like I think we do. Like I think it's because our priors were so much lower for Carlson that this jump, it's taken us some time to readjust fully. And I don't know if that's necessarily wrong, because he clearly has improved a lot, but I do think kind of that context is important, and where we ended up ultimately with him.
So here's a fun game. Let's play. Who would you rather
Oh
have
man.
right now? Would you rather want Cade Flat or Dayton Carlson? How about this? Who would you rather want for this season? How about that? Not long term. How about this
Yeah,
season?
yeah,
This
yeah.
indoor track season.
I mean, probably Carlson, just because he's a year further along and has run against these guys before, albeit not indoors. But that's tough. Like you can make a good argument for either side.
I'd say long term I want Cade Flat. I'd say right now this season I want Dayton Carlson.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, that was the men. Do you have any more names, or do we want to move to the women?
No, let's head to the women.
Also, real quick before we get going, Ben, there were a few minor changes in the spreadsheet from the original order, so you might want to actually check what we posted on the back end there. It's largely the same names, just a slightly different order than what's there. So, just a quick heads up, and for everyone listening, yes, we do make last second changes all the time, and by we I mean me, and everyone gets a little frustrated about that, but. Let's talk about. I'm going to kind of lump my first names together. I'm going to lump them together.
Okay.
It's Juliet Whittaker and
Yep.
Roisin Willis, superstar high schoolers, 800-meter megastars. Both ran 159, which is an absurd thing that I never thought I would ever say out loud about two high school freshmen who are both at Stanford. That's the wilder part. How do you rank them? Because here's the deal. I remember we ranked Athing Mu during her freshman year. She was ranked at like TSR 17. Obviously, she became one of the greatest middle distance runners to ever grace a collegiate track, ever. But this year's also a little different. Like, there's a lot more top heaviness to this year's. I mean, like, the number of women who have run under 202 is insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a legitimate, clear-cut, heavy title favorite, assuming she's healthy,
Yep.
in the 800 meters this year, and Lindsey Butler. There's multiple women who have run too flat, or like at least Sarah. Yeah, there's multiple women who have run too flat, and I think you also like consider indoor PRs. Where we rank those two women is about right, and so that's. I still don't know if we got it right, but I think in the context of the NCAA nowadays, it's correct.
I think you could have argued for 5 spots higher or 5 spots lower, and I don't think you'd be making a dishonest argument. And they were both on my list as well, just for that same reason, because the times are reflective of a top 10 runner. Like what they were able to do in high school is a reflection of a top 10 runner in the NCAA. But they haven't done it at the NCAA level. Indoors, again, and I'll say this over again, is harder you have to be more tactically sound in an indoor 800 than an outdoor 800. There's less opportunities to make moves. You're going to run in lane 2, lane 3 more often than you would in an outdoor race. You have to be smarter. And that could be a learning curve unless you're a thing moo and you're just straight up faster than anybody. You can just go out and lead the whole race and win. I don't know if either of these ladies are going to be able to do that, but I think they have raced enough, and they've raced on high levels at U20 World Championships, at very, like, I think they've run in multiple pro races before as well. I think they have the ability to get going from day one and be very competitive. But in this year's field, I don't know what that looks like. Does that mean they finish 4th and 5th? Does that mean they finish 2nd and 3rd? Like, I any of those results would not surprise me. Ultimately, long term, I think they're going to be the favorites in this event. But this year is kind of like a holding pattern, and I don't really know where to place them at this point.
I think it is more likely that they end up being ranked higher than where they're at now. But I also think that given the context of everything, this is a very fair ranking. And also, they're true freshmen. If you look at some of the other top tier 800 meter talents we have there, they're all highly experienced veterans. Very experienced. Like, some of the most experienced. This might be the most experienced 800 meter field I've ever seen in my 7 years now of doing this. 7.5.
There is going to be possibly a 201 woman not make the finals. Like, that is a very real possibility.
Yes,
almost likely. It is a loaded, and we saw this last year. It was a loaded field, and then you add 2 of the best freshman 800 meter runners ever into that mix. Like, it's going to be, just making it to NCAAs is going to be an incredible feat in the 800 this year.
All right, so who was your next name for the women's side?
So, and I'm making sure I found her in the updated rankings. Amaris Tyynismaa. Like, I was looking through the list and I was like, this feels low, but I get it. But at the same time, she could be a top 5 runner. She has such great talent. She looks like she's back to herself with her NCAA cross country performance, where she was, she was 9th. She ran 8:55 in the 3K. Like, I think she's back. And a fully back Amaris Tyynismaa, people might forget, she ran 4:09, was looking like one of the odds-on favorites in the 1500 meter 2 years ago outdoors. Like, when she's at her best, she can beat almost anybody. And I mean anybody besides, like, our probably top 2 or 3 in our rankings. I think she has that ability. Whether or not she's able to put that all together, we'll see. But she can be so good at anything from the 1500 to the 5K. And that kind of versatility and just her experience at this point, she's kind of gone through it all, quite frankly. I think she's going to have a huge season. But you look at the people that she's behind, and it's hard to argue with them not being ahead of her. Like, it's just a really good year. I think I feel so much better about the top 20 on the women's side than I do, I think, about the men. I see so many more established women that I feel good about. Like, I know what to expect. And I look at the men's list, and I'm like, number 18, really? That kind of feels high. Like, it feels so different. And I think Tyynismaa is just kind of unfortunately gets the bad end of the stick, where this is just a really good year for women's talent.
I completely agree. I mean, you said it so perfectly. It feels wrong. It feels wrong to place her where we did, which isn't to say that it's like a bad ranking per se, but like, you take a look at some of the women who are ahead of her, who truthfully just aren't as who aren't as dynamic. I should say this.
Yep.
Very few women are as versatile as she is, but these women either are top returners and top contenders for top spots in the 800 meters this year, in the mile. The mile on the women's side is like completely wide open this year. And, maybe they just have higher national meet finishes or more consistent national meet All-American honors on the track. A lot of some of these women aren't as dynamic, but they just have a few more All-American finishes, a little more consistency. And like, it's hard to fault Tyynismaa for being injured, right? I mean, like availability matters, but it feels wrong. There's about 2 women on this list where it just felt wrong, but I didn't have, and Mara and Scotty, when we try to average this out, we didn't have that much of a choice. I did tweak the back end of these rankings a little bit, just because some of them, you can't rationalize them one over the other, but it's tight. It's tight at every, like 14 to 25 in each woman to each woman. It's tight. And I didn't like doing these or trying to average out what everyone's rankings were.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like we could have bumped her up probably 4 or 5 spots, but like again, I don't think you look at the women that are ahead of her on this list, and they're all very accomplished in their own right. So I just think her what she's done in the past combined with what she's doing right now, coming off of a very strong cross country season, makes her one of the most dangerous women. Like, I don't think anybody's excited to be racing her at this point.
No, no, and I completely agree. So, um, another woman, Mia Barnett. Tough name, much like the Dayton Carlson, a little bit different. Mia Barnett was probably the best regular season rookie throughout all of last year. She was incredible. She ran 4:33 at the NCAA Indoor Championships last year, got to the finals. I think she placed 9th, no All-American honors. She went to the outdoor scene, had just a tough day at regionals. It happens. A little bit of a broken momentum in that final lap. Doesn't advance. Tough race. But she has a great cross-country season. She is still so young, so much upside, but she's also a little one-dimensional in the mile. And so when you don't have any All-American, when you have no All-American honors, 1 national meet experience, and just pretty much like 1 really, really, really good time, despite how young she is, and despite how much upside I think she has, it's like, well, then where does she fit among all these established veterans who do have crazy fast times, who do have All-American honors, who are more experienced, who have more dynamic and complete resumes? I don't know. And I think just trying to rank her was an impossible task.
Yeah, I agree. Finishing 10th at last year's indoor championships, she ran 4:33 in prelims last year. She, like you said, didn't have a great ending to her outdoor season, but looked like she picked things right back up this fall. I, again, I think this goes back to like the women's field is just so deep. You look at the group of women that were on the Bubble R rankings, whether they were ranked or whether they're in our just missed, and you can make a solid argument, I think, for a lot of them to be top 20 names. Like, and I think she falls into this category where she could be someone that in a little bit of a wide open mile field kind of fills that void and maybe isn't a favorite, but is someone that you feel good about finishing in the top 5. I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation for us going into this season. But at the same time, you're looking at all these other women that she's going to have to jump, like Olivia Howell and Amaris Tyynismaa and a lot of other names. And it's hard to say you feel confident in her jumping those other women, but she's clearly proven that she has the talent. She ran 4:11 in the 1500 last year. There aren't many other names that have her PRs in the mile and the 1500. And if she can kind of put things together tactically, I mean, she could be very dangerous.
I'm such a big fan. I really like Mia Barnett a lot. It's just like there are so many people who I'm such big fans of that I want to rank because you see how good they are. But if you're trying to be as fair as possible, if you're trying to weight postseason and regular season performances, historical times, like every factor, there's just some women who are better than her. And that's the challenging aspect of this, that people will say, you guys got it wrong. Well, I don't think there was ever a right answer. And I know I just got very philosophical, but that's the problem.
No, I think these women's rankings make you philosophical, because I
Yeah.
really don't think there are a lot of right answers in any of this, because there's so much quality this year. All right, so you took one of my names, so the last name that I have, and when you guys were talking about her in the chat, I was just like, I could see her being absolutely anywhere in like a 15 ranking range this year, and that was Lauren Gregory.
Oh,
I
not who I
I
thought.
I truthfully, when you guys were talking like about her, I was like you could tell me a lot of different places where you guys were like thinking about putting her, and that's she obviously has had so much experience, has had a lot of great accolades, but she, like, again, in a loaded field this year, I just don't know how much she stands out compared to a lot of other women, and what is her event going to be? Who is she really going to be challenging to be a title contender in? Like, those are questions that I'm having, because by the end of last spring, she was a 10K runner, really. Like, she looked like a 10K favorite and didn't have a great day outdoors, bounced back to finish fifth in the 5K. But like, if she's going against a lot of these other women in the 5K, the 5K just got a lot better. Obviously, Tui and Valby are there, and there's plenty of other names like Taylor Rowe, Kelsey Camille, who could be there. Like, there's a lot of competition there in the 5K, and if she drops down to the 3K 1500, she can. But and maybe that's ultimately what she does, because it's a little bit more of an opportunity there. But I had no idea where to place her, because she didn't run cross country. She has kind of she's proven that she can be solid at a national meet, but she hasn't really proven that she can really run at her best in a national meet quite yet.
And that's like why where we ranked her, it feels high,
It
but
does.
also it feels high, but like also if you like if you had gone back to any other season and you said this is where she's going to be ranked, you'd be like, that low, really?
Yeah. Because she's so versatile. Like, there really
Yes,
isn't many more women that are more versatile than her.
she has multiple crazy fast PRs. She is. I can't imagine there's another woman in the NCAA who is more experienced than her.
No.
She has numerous All American PRs. She has crazy range. She knows this competition like the back of her hand. And she's great tactically, usually. I just don't know like where I'm supposed to penalize her for.
And that's the thing, like, they're really she hasn't ever done anything that would make you go, like, that would make you doubt her. But I also feel like at the same time, she hasn't ever done anything that has, at least in a championship, that may like lights my hair on fire. Where I'm like, oh, okay, she has to be a top, like, let's say 5 runner in the country. She hasn't ever had that moment at nationals. She's had a lot of great moments throughout the regular season, to the point that we've thought she should be a title favorite at multiple times throughout her career. But it just hasn't happened at the NCAA level. And that just leaves me a little cold and makes me feel like this ranking might be a little high. But again, it's hard to see her dropping any further than where we put her because of that outstanding resume.
Yeah, yeah. It's also tough because her 5K race at Boston U recently, which was she ran like 15:34. Like
It
it's
was
hard.
fine.
It's fine, but I think we look at it almost like, wow, that was a tough performance. She ran 15:30s. She ran low 15:30s. And like it's so hard where this is like the most loaded year
Mm-hmm.
the 5K is I can remember seeing a long time.
Yep.
So it's hard from that perspective. I want to wrap up with one last name. Gabija Galvydyte,
Yep.
Oklahoma State. Came in as a 400 meter hurdler, moved up to the 800 meters, or at least, more seriously focused on. the 800 meters last winter, began to pick up some momentum, ran 2:03 to end her season. 2:03 at the end of the indoor track season. Got ninth at the NCAA Indoor Championships. Um, Also ran 2:46 in the 1,000 meters. Goes to the spring, really just attacks the 800 heavily. Also runs 4:19 for 1,500 meters. She goes 2:03, 2:03, 2:04, 2:02, 2:02, and then 2:01 in the finals of the outdoor national meet. Gets third overall. And I think we think, okay, so she's an 800-meter runner. Gonna be that's her focus. She then is top 80 at the cross country national meet. Excuse me, I just had dinner. And she then also runs 4:32 3 weeks ago at Boston University in the mile, ties for the win with Philomena Asicol. And now all of a sudden, our understanding of what she brings to the table, her value, she has a bronze national meet finish. She's a 2:01 800 PR, and she has a 4:32 mile in December after a top 80 cross country national meet finish. What do you do with someone who you look where she's ranked and you look who she's sandwiched between, and you're like, well, that can't be right. But then you also are like, well, who has a resume better than hers over the past year? And that's the problem.
I know I talked about her, I think, when we did our BU recap about ultimately ending up in the 800. But I mean, the more I think about it, this 800 field is just going to be so incredibly loaded that 4:32 really opens up the door to the mile. And if you look at our rankings and you look at, okay, well, if you go by our rankings, who's the favorite in the mile? Is it her if she decides to run? Like at this point, it seems like that might be her best chance at it. I think it's definitely her best chance at an NCAA championship. Whether or not that's her best event to score and do her best, I don't know. But the door seems open in the mile in a way that it just seems so firmly closed, just because of the sheer volume of contenders, and then the top end contender in Lindsey Butler in the 800.
Well, the women's mile was like pretty wide open last year.
Yeah.
Like it was really wide open, really. And I don't think we had like a good idea. I remember like we did like our rank your national title favorites
Mm-hmm.
in like order of likeliness, and I think we put the women's 1,500 a mile like last because we just had no idea. And I think it's shockingly going to be more wide open this year,
Yeah.
which leads me to believe like are all of these women going to do the 3K 5K double? Does that make sense? Like why would Tui put herself through that when she can do mile DMR?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like that
Maybe.
like why would Galvydyte run the 800? It's so stacked. Go do the mile. She's probably great tactically.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think you look at a lot of the other top names you mentioned Tui. I think they're going to be eyeing that mile all year. They're going to run a quick mile at some point just to give themselves the option, and then they're going to think. I mean, I know we talked about this last year, but Lindsey Butler, like, obviously, I think she's the favorite in the 800, but she might look at the mile. She's run some quick miles before. Does she be like, yeah, maybe I'll just do that? I think this might be an easier path. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people having that conversation with their coaches over the next few months.
Lindsey Butler split 429 in the ACC
Yeah.
DMR anchor leg. Like why could she not run the mile? I and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well if they're gone,
Everybody
then
runs the mile.
yeah, everyone runs the mile, then like how open is the 800 then in that case? Like if Butler doesn't do it. So I don't like there's going to be at least one or two surprises that take us off guard. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think it's weird to see Galvydyte ranked where she is. But also I'd love for someone to tell me why that's the wrong spot.
No, I think where we landed is a good spot, and I think she is one of the more up and coming runners in the country at this point. What she's doing, a lot like her teammate Messaoudi, just a meteoric
Mhm.
rise over the last few months. It's been amazing to watch, and I think the sky's the limit for her, and it'll be interesting to see where she lands this season, because this could be the breakout year for her on the track, honestly.
Well, Ben, no more hints. Got to go check it out on the site. We're recording this Monday. Part 1 of the rankings will release Monday. Part 2 coming tomorrow. D2, D3 later this week. Happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We appreciate it. Thank you to Hoka for the incredible support, as always, throughout the month of December. I almost said September. That's not true. December. And shout out to Wyatt Barnsley for the fantastic audio work. He'll have to maybe adjust the first part of this, as we always have technical issues. But Ben, that's all I got on my end.
All right. Well, until next time, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.